Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Bava Batra, pages 82 to 88. Pebet, 82. Kana shlosha, kana karka. If you buy 3 trees in someone else's field, you have also acquired some land together with those 3 trees. Vikama, but how much land? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, hareze kana tachtehem, you acquire the land that is directly beneath the trees, ubeinehem, and in between them, v'chutza lahen, and around each tree, kemalo orev salo, enough space to accommodate the picker, the fruit picker, and his basket. So a modest amount of territory is acquired when three trees are purchased from a field. Pei Gimel, 83. Arba midot b'mochrin. There are 4 character traits or scenarios when it comes to the sale of produce. Machar lo chitin yafot v'nimtzu rot. What happens if the sale was supposed to be good quality wheat, but in fact the sale included poor quality wheat? Halokeach yachol lachzor bo. The buyer, who has effectively been defrauded, is allowed to renege on the deal and say, we're reversing this. The deal never happened. What happens if it was supposed to be for lesser quality wheat, but in fact included better quality? The seller, who made a little bit of a blunder here, is allowed to retract and say, let's undo the deal. If the deal was supposed to be for poor quality and in fact included poor quality, or higher quality and in fact had higher quality, then nothing went wrong. If nothing went wrong, nobody can retract. Nobody can retract. However, what if it wasn't just a question of quality, but rather the item itself was the wrong item? If it was red wheat and it was in fact white wheat, or if it was supposed to be white and turned out to be red, or chometz instead of wine it was vinegar, instead of vinegar it was wine. In these scenarios, either party, the buyer or the seller, is able to retract because the deal didn't go down as it was supposed to go down. An alternative item was substituted, and that's not kosher. Pei Daled, 84. Minayin la torem, min hara'a la yafa, shetrumato truma. How do we know that if a person separates teruma, the priestly emolument, from a supply of produce, and the supply of produce is yafa, it's good stuff, but the item taken as the truma was ra'ah, was poor quality? How do you know that even despite not doing things in an ideal way, the truma has halachic status? It's considered an emolument, and you can undo it. And you shall not bear a sin, the pasuk says, when you raise up the chelav, the first part. So if there was no validity to the taking of the poor quality on the good quality for truma, then there would be no sin. Essentially, no harm, no foul. Nothing happened. You just have to take other stuff as truma. Why would there be a chet? Why would there be a sin? Because the action stands. The truma, which was now poor quality, actually is truma, and that is a problem. So the mitzvah was done. It was done in a sinful fashion, but there's no turning back. Hey, 85. We asked the following question. What happens if the transaction is occurring on the property of the seller and the produce is being poured into the utensil of the buyer? Is the buyer's utensil able to acquire for the buyer and have the transaction be officially finalized when the utensil of the buyer is physically located on the property of the seller? And the Gemara goes on an extended excursus to try to figure out what the answer to this question is without coming to a definitive conclusion. Hevav, 86. Amar Rava, Lo shanu eladorim shein dakin lagbiyah. When we say that metaltalin, movable items, can be acquired by way of meshichav, drawing near, physically drawing near to you, that was only said regarding things where it's not customary, it's not the standard practice to do hagbah, lifting, which is a preferred and superior act of kinyan. However, those items which are typically lifted up, behagba in meshichalo. Then, if you want to effect an acquisition, a kinyan which is binding, it must be by way of hagba, of lifting up, rather than the lesser form of kinyan, that of meshicha. Pei Zayin, 87. Chayav lahatif shalosh tipin. When you're selling viscous fluids, seller to buyer, and the seller is pouring out from his utensil into the buyer's utensil, so there's going to be some of the liquid that remains stuck in the seller's utensil, and you have to wait a little while, a few seconds, for the last drops to spill out. Doesn't all flow out at once. There's going to be some residue which has to be spilled out slowly. So there's an obligation to have 3 drops. After the flow has stopped, 3 more drops, and then the sale is complete. A storekeeper is not obligated to do this shalosh tipin, this business of the 3 drops. Only a random homeowner who's doing an act of selling must do it, but the storekeeper who's busy and doesn't have time for this nonsense doesn't have to do so. Rabbi Yehuda Merav Shabbat Chashecha Patur. However, Rabbi Yehuda qualifies that and says, no, but maybe only on Friday afternoon, when everyone is in a rush to get home for Shabbat to finish their Sabbath preparations. In that scenario, the storekeeper need not do the shalosh tipin. But on the regular weekday, when he's not in such a horrible rush, he has to do it. Peifet, 88. Amar Rabbi Levi, Tasha gezel gezel gavoa. It's worse to steal from a mundane person, a regular person, a human being, than it is to steal from the gavoa, from the temple. Or rather, maybe kasher should be understood as it's going to be more difficult for you in terms of the punishment imposed. Whatever, however we want to understand kasher, it's worse when the victim is a person than when the victim is the hektish, the temple treasury, or God himself. Why? Because the verse that talks about stealing from a regular person mentions the word chet, sin, before the word me'ilah, misappropriation. Whereas it's the other way around when it comes to the victim being the gavoha, being the temple. So this is a way of the Talmud telling us, Ben Adam lachavero, you better behave yourself. Don't steal from people. Everyone have a great week.